There was a street in North Carolina where Christmas didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly. First, it showed up as a faint glow behind living room curtains, the soft yellow of string lights being tested after 11 months in a cardboard box. Then came the smell of pine, real pine, dragged in from tree lots and tied clumsily to sedans with red twine. And finally, somewhere around the first week of December, the street itself began to change. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in that quite unmistakable way that tells you the year is ending whether you're ready or not. It wasn't special, that was the point. Maplewood Lane looked like a thousand other American streets built in the late 70s. Ranch style houses, driveways just wide enough for two cars, mailboxes leaning slightly to one side like tired men. If you drove through during the summer, you won't remember it, but in December, Maplewood Lane transformed into something else entirely. Christmas mattered here. Not in a flashy mall window way, but in a deeply personal way. People competed quietly, who had the warmest porch lights, who played the best music, whose wreath looked the most natural instead of store-bought. Families walked the sidewalks after dinner, hands in pockets, breath visible in the cold, pointing out decorations like museum exhibits. Oh, they added a snowman this year. Did you see the reindeer at the Wilsons? They finally fixed that flickering light. By December 10th, nearly every house was glowing. Every house except one. At the far end of Maplewood Lane, where the street curved slightly before disappearing into trees, sat a narrow, older home that never joined in. It wasn't abandoned. The lawn was trimmed, the mailbox wasn't broken, but year after year, December came and went and that house stayed dark. Except for one thing, a single Christmas light, warm, white, glowing steadily in the front window. It never blinked, just one light, never changed color. People noticed it the way you notice something out of place without realizing why it bothers you. Kids asked about it, parents shrugged it off. Teenagers dared each other to walk past the house at night. That's the quiet guy's place, someone would say. He keeps to himself. Probably doesn't like holidays. The man who lived there was named Thomas Reed, and nobody on Maplewood Lane really knew him. Thomas Reed had moved in 8 years earlier, driving a faded blue pickup with out-of-state plates. He'd unloaded his own boxes. He hadn't asked for help. He hadn't introduced himself. Within a week, the plates were local, the curtains were hung, and Thomas Reed settled into the rhythm of the street without ever fully becoming part of it. He waved sometimes, briefly, a raised hand, a nod. He didn't attend block parties, didn't complain, didn't borrow tools. He just existed. And on Maplewood Lane, existence without participation made people uncomfortable, especially in Christmas. Because Christmas on Maplewood Lane wasn't just a holiday. It was a public declaration. Lights meant you belonged. Decorations meant you were okay. Darkness meant something was wrong. And Thomas Reed's house stayed dark. Every year the same pattern repeated. Thanksgiving passed, decorations went up, carolers appeared, and then someone, always someone different, would notice the light in Thomas Reed's window. Is that just one light? It became a quiet tradition of its own. People didn't talk about it loudly. They mentioned it in driveways, in kitchens, over the low hum of football games and the clink of coffee mugs. I feel bad for him. Maybe he lost someone, or maybe he just doesn't care. Children made stories up. Teenagers exaggerated. Adults speculated without admitting they were speculating. No one ever knocked. There was something about the way Thomas Reed held himself that discouraged questions. He walked with purpose, shoulders slightly forward, as if bracing against wind that wasn't there. His clothes were plain, his hair always neat. He looked like someone who had learned long ago not to expect much from people and to give even less back. But the light confused everyone because it wasn't accidental. It was placed deliberately in the center of the front window, visible from the street, not festive, not decorative, just present, like a marker, as if he wanted to be seen, but only just enough. By mid-December, Maplewood Lane was fully awake. Inflatable Santas bowed lazily in yards. Candy cane stakes lined sidewalks. Music leaked from open garage doors. Snow machines hissed softly during community events even when the weather refused to cooperate. And still, Thomas Reed's house did not change. Except one year, it almost did. It was the year the Wilsons moved in next door to him. New family, two kids, loud laughter, big ideas. The kind of people who treated Christmas like a second job. They decorated early, very early. One evening, as Thomas Reed pulled into his driveway, he found Linda Wilson standing at the property line holding a string of lights. "Oh, hi," she said, waving too enthusiastically. "We're putting lights up this weekend. Thought I'd ask you if you wanted any help." Thomas stopped. He looked at the lights in her hands, then at the house, then back at her. "No," he said, polite, final, "but thank you." Linda smiled anyway. "If you change your mind, I won't." That was the end of the conversation. The next morning, Maplewood Lane noticed something unusual. For the first time since anyone could remember, Thomas Reed's front porch light was on. It wasn't decorative, just the regular porch bulb, but it stayed on all day. People noticed. "Did you see his light? Is he decorating? Maybe this is the year." By nightfall, the porch light went off. The window light remained. Nothing else changed. From that moment on, the light stopped being just a curiosity. It became a question. Why that light? Why only one? Why every year? People didn't realize it yet, but they were already building a story around Thomas Reed, fill in the silence he left behind with assumptions, guesses, half-formed theories, and stories, once they take root, don't need facts to grow. They need fear, they need uncertainty, they need something to be just slightly off. That December, something was off on Maplewood Lane. It started with small things. A package delivered to the wrong porch, a car door found unlocked, a door barking at nothing in the middle of the night. Nothing serious, nothing alarming, but enough. And every time something felt wrong, people glanced unconsciously toward the end of the street, toward the house with the single light. Thomas Reed noticed the looks. He always did. He noticed the way conversations stopped when he passed, the way people smiled too late or not at all. He noticed the kids who stayed longer than they should have, the adults who pretended not to. And every night, after the street quieted and the decorations hummed softly in the cold, Thomas Reed stood in his living room and looked out through the window. At Maplewood Lane, at the lights, at the houses, at the families. And then he looked at the single light glowing behind him, the one he never turned off. Because to Thomas Reed, that light was not decoration. It was not celebration. It was not hope. It was a promise. And on Maplewood Lane, no one had any idea what that promise was. Not yet. There is something about Christmas that sharpens people's attention. In other months, you can mind your own business. You can live quietly. You can exist on the street without becoming part of its emotional inventory. But December doesn't allow that. December demands participation. It demands proof. Proof that you're okay. Proof that you belong. On Maplewood Lane, Christmas turned neighbors into observers. They noticed who decorated early. They noticed who didn't decorate at all. They noticed which houses smelled like cookies and which stayed dark and silent. And more than anything else, they noticed Thomas Reed. Not because he changed, because he didn't. Every morning, Thomas left his house at exactly 6:20 a.m. He wore the same dark jacket, the same boots, the same calm expression that never quite reached his eyes. He backed his truck out carefully, never scraping the curb, never revving the engine. At 6:20 p.m. he returned, always alone. No radio loud enough to be heard, no phone calls taken in the driveway, no bags from stores, no wrapped boxes, just him. By the second week of December, Maplewood Lane had developed a rhythm. The Wilson kids practiced carols in the driveway. The Harris family hosted their annual ugly sweater party. The air carried laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of happiness that made people feel safe. And then there was Thomas Reed's house, silent, still, watching. It wasn't that he hid anything suspicious. It was that he did nothing festive at all. Does he even celebrate? Linda Wilson asked one evening, standing beside her husband as they adjusted a blinking reindeer. Some people don't, her husband shrugged. Yeah, but everyone celebrates something. That sentence lung longer than she intended. Across the street, Mrs. Carter pretended not to listen while she wanted her porch plants. Plants that should have been dead by now, but somehow survived every winter out of pure stubbornness. Mrs. Carter had lived on Maplewood Lane the longest, 32 years. She remembered when the street had been dirtier, louder, rougher. Back then, people didn't decorate as much. They didn't want each other this closely. But this time, times change. And she didn't like how often her eyes drifted to Thomas Reed's window at night. One evening, as she stood washing dishes, she noticed something else. Thomas Reed was standing at his window, not staring out, just standing there. The light behind him cast his face in shadow, turning him into a silhouette. He didn't move, didn't shift, didn't raise his hand. He just stood. Mrs. Carter dried her hands slowly. That's odd, she whispered to no one. The next day, rumors began the way they always do, disguised as concern. I hope he's okay. He looks tired. Did you see him last night? Someone mentioned the porch light incident again. Someone else brought up how long he'd lived there without family ever visiting. Another neighbor casually mentioned that Thomas Reed worked night security at a distribution center just outside town. Night shifts mess with people, someone said. They do. Someone else agreed. You never really know them. That word "know" became the problem because Maplewood Lane liked knowing things. They know who was struggling. They knew who was happy. They knew who was celebrating. Thomas Reed existed outside that knowledge, and uncertainty makes people uncomfortable, especially during Christmas. On December 15th, something happened that tipped discomfort into suspicion. A package went missing. It was small, a box left at the Wilsons' porch, nothing expensive, a toy, replaceable, but it vanished. No camera footage caught anything useful, no delivery mistake could be confirmed. People looked around, and slowly, almost unconsciously, eyes turned toward the end of the street, toward the quiet house, toward the single light. No, that's ridiculous, Linda said quite quickly when someone half joked about it. He wouldn't. But the joke landed wrong. That night, Thomas Reed noticed two things. First, the way Mrs. Carter's curtains twitched as he passed. Second, the way Linda Wilson smiled too fast when she waved. He felt it then, that familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, recognition. He'd felt it before, years ago, in another town, another street. The moment when people start watching you, not because of what you've done, but because of what they think you might do. Thomas unlocked his door and stepped inside. He turned on the lamp, the same lamp, the only Christmas light. He stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the switch, eyes closed. You said you'd be better, he murmured under his breath, but the light stayed on. The next few days stacked uneasily. Another package delayed, a garage door found open overnight, footprints in the frost that didn't clearly belong to anyone. Nothing criminal, nothing provable, but enough to feed a story. By December 18th, Maplewood Lane had quietly decided something was wrong. No one said it directly, no one accused. They just started locking doors earlier, checking windows twice, watching. And Thomas Reed felt the weight of their attention pressing in on him. On the night of December 19th, as snow finally dusted the street, Thomas did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He stepped outside after dark. No reason, no destination, just air. The street glowed around him, warm, golden, alive. Christmas music drifted from somewhere down the block. Laughter echoed faintly. As Thomas walked, conversations softened, voices dipped, eyes followed. He stopped under a spotlight, breath visible in the cold. For a moment, he imagined that what they saw, a quiet man, no decorations, no family, no visible joy, a blank space where celebration should be. He turned back towards his house. The single light burned steadily in the window, waiting for him. And on Maplewood Lane, no one realized yet that they were watching the wrong thing, because the real danger wasn't the man who stayed quiet. It was the story they were building about him. And once a story like that takes hold, Christmas doesn't soften it, it sharpens it. Suspicion doesn't arrive loudly, it doesn't knock, it seeps. By December 20th, Maplewood Lane had given suspicion a shape, and that shape looked exactly like Thomas Reed. It started with the dog. Mrs. Harris's golden retriever, Max, had never barked at anyone on the street, not once. He was gentle to the point of embarrassment, the kind of dog that wagged at burglars and sat politely when strangers reached for his head. But that morning, when Thomas walked past the Harris house at 6:20 a.m., Max lost his mind, barking, snarling, slamming against the front window like he'd seen something dangerous. Thomas stopped. He didn't raise his hands, didn't step back. He just stood there, boots on frosted pavement, heart ticking faster than it should. "Easy, boy," he muttered. The barking didn't stop. From inside, Mrs. Harris pulled the curtains back sharply. Her eyes met Thomas's for half a second, just long enough to register something she didn't like. She yanked the curtain shut. Thomas continued walking, jaw clenched. By noon, everyone had heard about the dog. Animals sense things. They know. He must have done something to scare it. By afternoon, the story had grown teeth. That evening, the Wilsons found muddy footprints near the side gate, too large to be a child's, too deep to be old. "Probably nothing," Mark Wilson said, though he photographed them anyway. "Still," Linda replied, "with everything else." They didn't finish the sentence. They never needed to. At 7:48 p.m., Thomas heard a knock on his door. It startled him, not because of the sound, but because no one ever knocked. When he opened it, two faces stared back at him, Mark Wilson and Officer Daniel Brooks. Local police, friendly, familiar, the kind of cop who waved during parades and helped jumpstart cars in winter. "Evening, Thomas," Mark said quickly, too quickly. Officer Brooks smiled, but it didn't quite reach in his eyes. "Mind if we ask you a couple of questions?" Thomas hesitated for half a second, just long enough to be noticed. "Sure," he said, stepping back. The house smelled faintly of pine cleaner, sparse furniture, no photos, no decorations except the lamp in the corner. Officer Brooks glanced around. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," Thomas replied. "Couple of packages went missing in the neighborhood," Brooks said lightly, "just doing a routine check." Thomas nodded. "I don't have anything to do with that." "Of course," Brooks said, "just covering bases." Mark shifted his weight. "You work nights sometimes, right?" "Security," Thomas answered. "Evenings, sometimes late." Officer Brooks scribbled something in his notebook. "Anyone visit you recently?" Brooks asked. "No." "Family nearby?" "No." Another note. The question stayed polite, casual, but Thomas felt it, that invisible tightening like a rope slowly pulled taut. When they finally left, Mark avoided his eyes. "Happy holidays," he said, forcing a smile. Thomas closed the door carefully, locked it, then leaned his forehead against the wood. He stayed there longer than necessary. That night he dreamed of snow swallowing his house. By December 21st, Maplewood Lane had unofficially decided Thomas Reed was a problem. Not a criminal, not yet, but a risk. People whispered on sidewalks, conversations stopped when he passed, porch lights flicked on when he walked home, as if triggered by motion sensors inside human minds. The missing packages were suddenly many, the noises at night suddenly louder, the fear suddenly justified, and fear, once justified, looks for confirmation. At 2:14 a.m., Mrs. Carter woke to the sound of metal clanging. She peered through her window. At the end of the street, Thomas Reed stood beside his truck. The back door was open. He was loading something heavy. She couldn't see what. Her breath caught. She reached for her phone, but before she could raise it, Thomas closed the truck, paused, and looked straight down the street, right at her window. Mrs. Carter ducked back instinctively. Her heart hammered. When she peeked again, the truck was gone. By morning, the story had cemented itself. He's active at night. He's moving things. He knows we're watching. Officer Brooks returned that afternoon, alone this time. Mind if I can come again? He asked. Thomas nodded. Brooks didn't sit. People are nervous, Brooks said plainly. It's Christmas. Kids, packages, you get it. I get it, Thomas said quietly. You ever been arrested? Brooks asked. The question landed like a dropped plate. No, Thomas replied. Brooks studied him for a long moment. Ever lived anywhere else? Yes. Why'd you leave? Thomas hesitated. Just a second too long. Work. Brooks closed his notebook. Well, he said, just try to keep things visible. Neighbors like visibility. After he left, Thomas stared at the empty doorway. Visibility. That night, he did something Maplewood Lane would never forget. He turned off the lamp. For the first time since he moved in, the window went dark, and instead of easing the street's nerves, it confirmed their worst fear. Because now, Thomas Reed wasn't just quiet, he was hiding. And once a neighborhood decides you're hiding something, it stops seeing you as a human. December 22nd arrived with heavy snow and lighter patience. By morning, Maplewood Lane no longer whispered, it watched. Curtains moved too often, doors opened a little too fast, cars idled longer than necessary. The street had entered a phase every quiet neighborhood eventually does when fear runs out of places to hide. They call it being careful, but it was judgment in winter clothing. Thomas Reed noticed it immediately. When he stepped outside to scrape frost off his windshield, 3 porch lights clicked on at once. Not warm lights, not welcoming ones. Bright, alert, defensive. Mrs. Harris stood at her window pretending to water a plant that hadn't been alive since October. Mark Wilson's garage door was open, just wide enough for eyes to exist behind it. Thomas kept his head down. That afternoon, a Facebook post went up. Maplewood Lane Neighborhood Watch. Reminder to report any unusual activity. Multiple incidents of missing property. Stay alert. No name was mentioned. None was needed. Comments piled up. Better safe than sorry. Trust your gut, especially this time of year. Someone liked a comment that simply said, we all know. Thomas didn't see the post, but he felt it. At 6:30 p.m., snow started falling again. Thick, slow, cinematic snow. The kind that makes Christmas movies believable and real life quieter than it should be. Thomas put on his coat and stepped outside. He hadn't planned to go anywhere. He just needed air. Halfway down the sidewalk, he heard a voice. Thomas. He stopped. Officer Brooks stood near the Wilsons' mailbox, hands in his jacket pockets, posture casual but planted. Mind if we talk? Brooks asked. Thomas nodded. Off the record, Brooks said. I'm not here as a cop right now. I'm here as a neighbor. Thomas waited. Brooks exhaled slowly. People are scared. I'm not saying it's fear. I'm saying it's real. I haven't done anything, Thomas said. I believe you, Brooks replied. But his eyes flicked briefly to the houses around them. But belief doesn't matter once momentum starts. Thomas frowned. What does that mean? It means if something happens, Brooks said carefully, you'll be the first name people say, right or wrong. Snow landed on Brooks' shoulder, melted, disappeared. Then what do you want me to do? Thomas asked. Brooks hesitated, then said it. Maybe keep a low profile, no late night activity, no moving things, no surprises. Thomas laughed once, sharp, humorless. So, disappear? Brooks didn't answer because silence was easier than agreement. That night, Maplewood Lane made its decision. It happened at 9:41 p.m. The power flickered just once, enough to reset clocks, enough to rattle nerves already strung too tight. When the lights came back, Mrs. Harris screamed. Her back porch light was out, not burned out, broken. Glass shattered on the snow. She didn't call an electrician. She called the police. Officer Brooks arrived with 2 patrol cars. Flashlights cut through snow like knives. Neighbors gathered in coats and slippers, pretending concern but radiating something darker underneath. Thomas stood on his porch when Brooks approached. Mind stepping down here? Brooks asked. Thomas descended slowly. Mrs. Harris pointed with shaking fingers. It's him. It has to be. I was home, Thomas said. I never left. Mark Wilson spoke up. "Then how do you explain the timing?" Linda Wilson added, "You're always out at night." Someone else said, "Dogs don't lie." Someone else said, "My packages." Someone else said, "My kids are scared." The words stacked, built weight, built truth when none existed. Brooks raised his hands. "Let's slow this down." But the street had already sped past reason. Thomas felt it then, that irreversible moment when explanation becomes weakness. "I didn't break anything," he said. "I didn't steal anything. I didn't." A crash interrupted him. A snowball slammed into his chest. Thrown hard, deliberate. Someone laughed. A teenager, Mark's nephew, visiting for Christmas. Mark didn't scold him. No one did. That's when Thomas understood. This wasn't about evidence. This was about belonging. And Maplewood Lane had voted him out. Officer Brooks cleared his throat. "Thomas, maybe it's best if you stay with a friend tonight." Thomas stared at him. "I don't have friends." Brooks winced. "Then maybe a hotel," Brooks said. Mrs. Harris crossed her arms. "I'll sleep better knowing he's not here." That sentence sealed it. Thomas went back inside without another word. He packed a duffel bag, not in a rush, with precision, as if he'd practiced this moment before. Before leaving, he stopped in the living room, looked at the bare walls, the lamp, the window. Outside, snow continued falling, innocent, beautiful, indifferent. When he stepped onto the porch with his bag, no one stopped him, but every eye followed. His truck started. Headlights washed over familiar houses. No one waved. No one said Merry Christmas. As Thomas drove away, Maplewood Lane exhaled. They told themselves they'd done the right thing. They told themselves fear was wisdom. They told themselves they were safe now. They were wrong. Because when a neighborhood forces the wrong man out, it doesn't remove danger, it invites it. And the real secret was still living among them, watching, waiting, smiling at the snow. Thomas Reed did not come back. That fact settled over Maplewood Lane by morning like untouched snow, clean on the surface, heavy underneath. His house sat dark, no porch light, no tire tracks, no sign of life, and for the first time in days the neighborhood felt quiet. Too quiet. Mrs. Harris told herself it was relief. She brewed coffee and stared out her kitchen window at the empty driveway across the street. "Good," she muttered, "that's good." But her hands shook as she lifted the mug. By noon, Christmas decorations went up faster than usual, almost aggressively. Inflatable Santas, reindeer lit so bright they hurt the eyes. Garlands layered thick like armor. Maplewood Lane tried to dress over its guilt. Mark Wilson nailed a wreath to his door and stepped back proudly. "Looks better already," he said to Linda. Linda didn't answer. She was watching Thomas's house. At 2:17 p.m., the first thing went missing. It was small, almost laughable. Mrs. Harris's outdoor nativity. The shepherd figurine vanished from her lawn. No footprints, no disturbance, just gone. She blamed raccoons. Then at 3:40 p.m., Linda Wilson noticed something else. Her Amazon delivery notification said delivered. Her porch said empty. She checked the security camera. The footage glitched, froze, then jumped forward. No thief, no figure, just absence. Her stomach tightened. By dusk, the group that exploded. Maplewood Lane watch. Anyone else missing things? My porch cam is acting weird. Is the power acting strange for anyone? Probably just weather. The one message appeared from Mark Wilson. "Thomas left last night. Just saying." 3 people liked it. No one questioned it. Christmas Eve arrived with bells and tension. Snow fell harder, the kind that muffles sound, the kind that hides movement. At 7:12 p.m., Officer Brooks drove through the street, slower than usual. He didn't stop, he just looked. At 6:46 p.m., Mrs. Harris's motion light turned on. She opened the door, heart racing. Nothing there, just snow. At 8:03 p.m., Mark Wilson's garage door lifted halfway on its own, then dropped. He cursed the sensor and went back inside. At 8:19 p.m., the power flickered again, this time longer. When it came back, the Wilsons' Christmas tree lights were off, but something else was on. Their back porch light. They hadn't turned it on. Linda stared at it through the glass. "Mark," she whispered, "did you do that?" Mark shook his head slowly. That's when the knock came. 3 slow knocks. Measured, intentional. Mark opened the door. No one stood there, but something sat on the porch. A box. Wrapped. Brown paper. Simple twine. No tag. Just a name written in black marker. Mark. Linda stepped back. No, no, I don't like this. Mark bent down, picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the box was a security camera. One of theirs, smashed. Along with something else, a folded piece of paper. Mark opened it, his face drained of color. "What?" Linda asked. He didn't answer. She grabbed the paper. It was a screenshot from months ago, their own camera footage, a date circled, a time stamped, 2:14 a.m. The image showed Mark Wilson on Thomas Reed's driveway, holding a crowbar. Linda's knee buckled. "That's not," she began, but Mark was already backing away. The paper slipped from her hands. On the bottom, handwritten, "You were wrong about your neighbor, and very right about yourself." Across the street, Thomas Reed's house remained dark, but upstairs, for just a second, a light flicked on, then off. Mrs. Harris screamed. Christmas Eve shattered because Thomas Reed hadn't been the secret. He had been the mirror, and Maplewood Lane was finally being forced to look. The scream didn't belong to Mrs. Harris. Everyone thought it did, but it came from 2 houses down, sharp, raw, panicked. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for help, it demands witnesses. Lights snapped on across Maplewood Lane. Doors cracked open. Curtains pulled back just enough to hide behind. Linda Wilson was already crying when Mark grabbed his coat. "That camera, Mark, that wasn't," she stammered. But he was pale now, quiet, focused in a way Linda had never seen. "That footage shouldn't exist," he said. Outside, neighbors gathered in clumps like uneasy animals. Mrs. Harris stood wrapped in a cardigan, clutching her phone. "What's going on?" she demanded. Mark didn't answer her. His eyes went straight to Thomas Reed's house. Still dark, still silent. Officer Brooks arrived within minutes. Tires crunching over fresh snow. "What happened?" he asked. No one answered at first. Then Linda's voice cracked through the air. "There was a package," she said, "on our porch." Brooks turned. "From who?" She swallowed. "We don't know." Mark spoke next. It was a threat. That word hung heavy. Brooks raised an eyebrow. "What kind of threat?" Mark hesitated. "Too long." Linda looked at him sharply. "Mark?" He exhaled. "Someone left us. Private footage. Old footage." Brooks stiffened. "Of what?" Mark's jaw clenched. "Of me." Silence rippled. Mrs. Harris's voice cut in, sharp. "From where?" Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Thomas Reed's house. The street shifted. Eyes changed. Fear didn't disappear. It relocated. Linda felt it immediately. She felt the space open around her like a wound. Mrs. Harris took a step back. "So," she said slowly, "this whole time." Mark snapped, "No, don't start." But it had already started. The story they'd built around Thomas Reed cracked, and through that crack, old truths leaked out. Brooks held up a hand. "Enough. I need details." Linda took a breath she didn't want to take. "Mark used to check on Thomas's place," she said quietly. "After the noise complaints, he said he was just making sure everything was okay." Mrs. Harris's eyes widened. "You went onto his property?" Mark turned on her. "Everyone was scared. You called the police first." "I never broke into his yard," she shot back. Mark laughed bitterly. "You just ruined his life instead." That hit hard. Someone whispered, "Jesus." Brooks stepped closer. "Mr. Wilson, did he damage Mr. Reed's property?" Mark's voice dropped. "No," but his eyes betrayed him. Linda looked at him, truly looked, and realized something awful. She had never asked enough questions. Brooks nodded slowly. "I'm going to need you to come down to the station." Linda grabbed Mark's arm. "What? No." "It's routine," Brooks said. "Just questions." Mark pulled his arm free. As he walked to the patrol car, Mrs. Harris felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief, not justice, fear. Because if Thomas Reed had been watching, he hadn't just watched Mark, he'd watched all of them. Christmas lights blinked, a car door closed, and Maplewood Lane realized something too late. They had cheered the monster they were afraid of. They had created the monster they were afraid of, and then driven him into the dark. At 11:58 p.m., as snow fell heavier, Linda Wilson's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. Her front porch, taken seconds ago. And beneath it, one line. "You taught him how to disappear." Linda dropped the phone, and across the street, Thomas Reed's house remained empty. But the fear inside Maplewood Lane had just moved in for good. Christmas morning arrived quietly on Maplewood Lane. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels watchful. Snow covered the street like a blanket meant to hide something ugly underneath. Christmas lights still blinked from the night before. Stubbornly cheerful, unaware they were now decorating a crime scene that hadn't yet been declared one. Linda Wilson didn't sleep, not even for a minute. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone face down, afraid to look at it, afraid not to. Every sound outside made her flinch, the creak of branches, the distant hum of traffic, the furnace kicking on. Mark hadn't come home. Officer Brooks had promised it would be a few hours. It was now 7:14 a.m. Her coffee sat untouched, cold. Across the street, Mrs. Harris opened her door cautiously, as if the air itself might bite. She stepped onto her porch, scanning left, then right, her eyes landing, as they had for months, on Thomas Reed's house. Still dark, still silent. No lights, no decorations, no wreath, no tree in the window. Just a house that looked abandoned now, but somehow more present than ever. Mrs. Harris hugged her robe tighter. Her phone buzzed. A group message, Maplewood Watch. "Did anyone sleep last night? I feel sick. This isn't what we wanted." Mrs. Harris typed, erased, typed again. "We were protecting our families." She didn't believe it anymore. Inside her house, she walked past the tree where her grandson's present sat unopened. She had been so proud of his neighborhood, of how tight-knit they were. Now she couldn't shake the image of Thomas Reed standing in his kitchen at night, watching their silhouettes move behind warm windows, knowing what they whispered about him, knowing they were wrong. At 8:02 a.m., Linda's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. A video. She pressed play. The footage showed Maplewood Lane, early morning, pre-dawn, snow falling, stillness, and then movement. Someone walking slowly down the sidewalk. The timestamp read 4:11 a.m. The camera angle shifted. The footage was from inside a car, a parked car. The view lingered on Linda's house, then Mrs. Harris's, then the park entrance, and finally the spot where the missing boy had last been seen. Linda's breath hitched. The video ended. One sentence appeared on screen. "You never asked who else was watching." Her phone slipped from hands. She finally cried, not loud, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone who had waited too long to be honest with herself. At 9:30 a.m., Officer Brooks knocked. Linda nearly jumped out of her skin. He looked tired, older, his uniform rumpled. "May I come in?" he asked. She nodded. He sat across from her at the same table where the coffee had gone cold. "Mark's being released," Brooks said. "No charges, not enough evidence." Linda exhaled, relief and dread tangled together. "But," Brooks continued, "there's something you need to know." She braced herself, reviewed old footage from the park, the night the child disappeared. Linda's heart hammered. "There was another vehicle parked nearby," Brooks said, "unregistered. Not Mark's, not Thomas Reed's." Linda whispered, "Then whose?" Brooks met her eyes. "We don't know, but whoever it was had a clear line of sight, and they left no trace." Linda's voice trembled. You think Thomas was watching them? Brooks shook his head slowly. I think Thomas was watching you. The words landed like snow turning to ice. He installed cameras after the first vandalism report. Brooks continued. Legal ones, facing public areas. He reported it, but the paperwork got buried. Linda felt sick. All those nights, she murmured. All those times we thought he was the threat. Brooks stood. We're reopening everything. After he left, Linda sat alone, staring at the tree. She suddenly remembered something Thomas had said months ago during the one conversation they'd ever had. People don't like being observed, he'd said calmly, even when they're doing nothing wrong. At noon, church bells rang, families gathered, laughter echoed from houses trying desperately to reclaim normalcy. But Maplewood Lane couldn't, because at 12:47 p.m., every phone on the street buzzed at the same time. A group message from an unknown sender, a single image, a still frame from security footage. Mrs. Harris throwing trash into Thomas's bin. Mark stepped onto Thomas's lawn. Another neighbor peering through blinds, another keying his fence. Below the images, one message. You taught yourselves who to fear. Now learn who you were. Christmas ornaments reflected the glow of screens filled with guilt. And somewhere far from Maplewood Lane, Thomas Reed watched the snow fall on a world that had finally begun to understand him. Too late to apologize, too late to ask him to come back. He hadn't wanted revenge, he wanted truth, and now the neighborhood would choke on it. By the day after Christmas, Maplewood Lane no longer felt like a street. It felt like a courtroom without a judge. No one waved, no one smiled. Garage doors opened just long enough to let cars slip out, then slammed shut like secrets. People avoided eye contact the way they avoided mirrors, because mirrors were dangerous now. They showed things no one wanted to see. Linda Wilson noticed it first at the grocery store. Mrs. Harris was there. Same aisle, same brand of coffee she'd bought for years, and yet she pretended not to see Linda standing 5 feet away. Linda didn't blame her. After the message Thomas Reed had sent, the footage, the timestamps, the proof, every neighbor had retreated into themselves. The neighborhood chat went silent. No updates, no theories, no reassurance. Fear had changed shape. It wasn't him anymore. It was us. Mark came home late that afternoon. He looked smaller somehow, like a man who had finally realized the walls were never there to protect him. They didn't hug. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. The TV played a Christmas rerun neither of them watched. I didn't mean to, Mark said finally. Linda didn't answer. I thought if I could just scare him, he continued. Make him leave, make us feel safe again. Linda turned to him slowly. You vandalized his house. Mark nodded. You trespassed. Another nod. And when people started whispering, she said, voice tight, you didn't stop them. Mark swallowed. You let them. Silence stretched. Finally, Mark said something that scared her more than the footage. I thought if everyone believed it, then it must be true. Linda stood up. That sentence, that logic was the real crime. Across the street, Mrs. Harris sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at an envelope she hadn't opened. It had arrived that morning. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot. Her message from the neighborhood group chat. The first one that mentioned Thomas Reed's name, highlighted, circled. Underneath it, a note written in careful block letters. Fear spreads fastest when someone gives it permission. Mrs. Harris's hands shook. She had raised 3 children. She had taught Sunday school. She had prided herself on good judgment. And yet, she had been the match. That afternoon, Officer Brooks knocked on doors again. This time, he wasn't asking about Thomas. He was asking about everyone else. Did you ever enter his property? Did you ever tamper with evidence? Did you ever exaggerate an incident? Doors closed quickly after he left. Some people lied. Some cried. Some admitted things they hadn't planned to carry for the rest of their lives. One neighbor confessed to stealing a package from Thomas's porch months earlier. Another admitted to calling child services anonymously. Another admitted to deleting footage from his own camera because it made the group look bad. The truth wasn't clean, it was layered, messy, shared. By evening, Maplewood Lane understood something irreversible. There had never been a single villain, just a series of small, cowardly decisions that fed off each other. Linda sat in her car that night, parked outside from Thomas Reed's empty house. Snow dusted the porch when the package had once been left. The windows reflected her own face back at her. She whispered, "I'm sorry." She didn't know if she meant it for Thomas or for herself. Her phone buzzed. One last message, unknown number. No image this time, just words. "I didn't leave to punish you. I left so you'd have to live with yourself." Linda closed her eyes. She finally understood. Thomas Reed hadn't been hiding. He'd been documenting. And now, Maplewood Lane would never again be able to tell the story where they were the heroes, because the quiet man next door hadn't been the threat. The fear was, and it lived behind every lit window on that street. The week after the snow melted, Maplewood Lane felt like a war zone wrapped in holiday lights. Not the cheerful kind, the ones that blinked sporadically like warning signals. It started with a knock at Thomas Reed's empty house. Agent Brooks had been called back again for another anonymous trip. "Ma'am," he said to Linda Wilson, who was shivering on the porch despite the mild March air. "We need to go through all the footage, every single one." Her stomach sank. Even the cameras inside their homes? Brooks gave a thin, humorless smile, especially those. Inside the living room, monitors flickered. Streets, sidewalks, driveways, front doors. Every frame dissected like tissue under a microscope. And then they saw him. The man they had never suspected, Mr. Carl Whitman, the neighbor everyone had trusted, the man who waved at every passerby, the guy who baked cookies for school fundraisers. He was the one planting evidence. He was the one stirring rumors. He was the one smiling while watching Maplewood Lane spiral into hysteria. The footage was meticulous. One night, 3 months prior, Carl had slipped into Thomas's porch, snapping a photograph of a package left outside. That same night, he called the neighborhood chat under a fake account, sowing suspicion. Every whisper, every glance, every twitch of doubt, Carl had orchestrated it. Linda's hand shook. She could barely look at the screen. But why? Brooks didn't answer immediately. He just rewound the tape again, showing Carl's face as he watched from his window across the street, smiling, calculating. The man who baked cookies had baked lies instead. By mid-morning, the news had trickled down the block. "Carl Whitman?" Someone gasped in the house in a hushed voice. Our Carl." "Yes," said Officer Brooks, finally stepping outside for the first time that week. "The quiet man we all trusted, the one who smiled too much. He's been manipulating all of you for months." Tears, anger, shame. The neighbors recoiled like a single body experiencing collective betrayal. Linda ran home. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes, not just a cold monitor. Through the window, she could see Carl tending his garden, humming a tune from last Christmas, oblivious, smiling. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask why he would ruin so many lives. For what? Entertainment? Power? Revenge? And then she noticed it. A notebook lying on the bench next to him, pages filled with names, dates, observations, motives, plans. He had catalogued every fear, every lie, every misstep on the street. Maplewood Lane had been a chessboard, everyone unwitting pawns. Linda's phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. The ones who screamed the loudest never knew what silence felt like. "You saw the pieces, but not the player." Her hands tightened on the phone. She didn't understand. Not yet. Meanwhile, the community meeting was called at the local hall. Families crowded the benches, some standing along the walls, eyes darting. Detective Harper stepped up. "We have confirmation. Carl Whitman is the source of the chaos. He manipulated events to make Thomas Reed appear suspicious, knowing the town would bite every bait we gave them." A wave of rumors, a wave of murmurs. One man shouted, "But he's our friend." Another whispered, shaking, "How do we know we're not next?" The hall descended into fear, confusion, and disbelief. Linda stood at the back, clutching her coat. Her thoughts raced. Thomas Reed had left. He had gone into silence, but the real villain, he had stayed, smiling, watching. It wasn't enough to expose him. They had to confront him, and none of them knew if Maplewood Lane would survive that confrontation. Harper's voice cut through the panic. "This isn't just about Thomas anymore. It's about every single one of you. Your paranoia, your whispers, your inactions. Carl fed on it. And now you have to decide, do you rebuild or do you crumble?" Linda's mind flashed back to the Christmas when Thomas had left a gift on her doorstep. She had laughed, thinking it was simple neighborly kindness. Now she understood that gift had been a test, not of generosity, but of attention, of judgment, of awareness. The snow may have melted, but the scars it left on Maplewood Lane would linger, because the man smiling in his garden wasn't just a neighbor, he was a mirror, and the reflection, every secret, every fear, every lie the town had buried in its own heart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maplewood Lane, turning the suburban street into a stage for reckoning. Every neighbor, every family that had felt the sting of suspicion and fear gathered at the corner near Carl Whitman's house. Detective Harper stood at the front, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the crowd. "We confront him today, calmly, collectively. We cannot let fear control this." Linda Wilson's hands were numb. Her heart thumped like a drumbeat against her chest. She could barely breathe, but she forced herself forward. The front door of Carl's home was a polished veneer hiding months of manipulation. The wrath of Christmas still hung crookedly half forgotten, a stark contrast to the dark truth inside. Harper knocked firmly. No answer. "Mr. Whitman," Harper called. "This is the Maplewood Lane community. We need to talk. Now." Inside, Carl's eyes gleamed, calm, unfazed. He had been expecting this. Perhaps he had been even orchestrated the timing. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the man who had haunted their lives with smiles and silence. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said, voice smooth, almost theatrical. "You destroyed our community," Harper said, stepping forward. "You made a man disappear. You poisoned every neighbor against each other. Why?" Carl tilted his head, a faint smirk on his lips. "Because you let me. Because you didn't see what was happening until I was too late." It merely reflected what was already there: fear, suspicion, judgment. "I didn't create it, I amplified it." The neighbors murmured, shock rippling like a tide. Linda felt bile rise in her throat. "We trusted you. You baked cookies for our kids, brought gifts during Christmas, and all along it was a setup?" Carl shrugged. "Trust is a funny thing. Easy to earn, harder to question. I used that. I exposed your weakness, that's all." Thomas Reed, who had been hiding on the periphery, stepped forward. His voice shook with restrained fury. "You made me the villain of this street. You stole my life for what? A game?" Carl's eyes flickered with something almost human, a trace of amusement. "A test, maybe, or maybe just truth. You've all been complicit in your own paranoia. I only nudged the dominoes." The air felt thick. The neighborhood, once vibrant with friendly chatter and holiday cheer, had transformed into a beautiful battlefield of eyes, glances, and trembling hands. Harper raised his hand, restoring silence. "Enough games, Carl. This stops today. You will face legal consequences for harassment, defamation, and any other charges we can compile. But first, truth. Tell me everything, every scheme, every lie, every manipulation." Carl sighed dramatically, stepping onto the porch. "Fine. You want confession? Here it is. I followed patterns. I watched reactions. I exploited the rumors you shared among yourselves. Every neighbor who whispered about Thomas, every child who cried over suspicion. It fueled my experiments. I didn't touch anyone physically. I merely exposed what was inside all of you." Linda's hand clenched. "You're sick and dangerous." "Perhaps," Carl replied softly, "or perhaps I simply revealed what you refused to see. Fear doesn't need a culprit. It just needs a mirror, and I am the mirror you couldn't avoid. A tense silence followed. Then, from the crowd, a young teenager spoke. Does that mean we're all bad? Carl's smile softened for a fleeting moment. No, it means you're human, and humans are messy, that's all. Learn from it, or remain broken. The choice is yours. Detective Harper stepped forward. Carl Whitman, you will come with us. The law will decide your punishment. Maplewood Lane will decide its healing. Carl raised his hand slowly, almost theatrically, and let the cuffs slink into place. Not a word of resistance, just a faint smile. As the patrol car drove away, the neighbors turned to each other. Fear had dissipated, replaced with something heavier: realization, guilt, relief, and a strange, shared bond forged from chaos. Linda exhaled, finally letting tears stream freely. We survived him, she whispered. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. We survived ourselves, too. For the first time in months, Maplewood Lane felt sunlight on its streets. Children played in cautious laughter, still aware, still weary, but alive. Christmas lights still flickered on some porches, abandoned since the holiday season, but now they shone brighter, reflections of a community determined to reclaim what had been stolen: their trust, their peace, their connection. Carl Whitman's smiling face would linger in their memories, but the neighborhood had learned something crucial. Even when a villain manipulates fear, the true power lies in facing it together. And Maplewood Lane, battered but unbroken, had chosen to face it.